I keep saying the 2025 Jets have more talent than people realize. And now I've got proof. Locked On Jets starts now.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Thursday, July 17th, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GanggreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Well, today we have a special episode of Locked On Jets. As you know, this show is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. There is a podcast for each of the 32 NFL teams. And recently, our NFL hosts voted on the top 100 players in the NFL. Head on over to our show, Locked On Sports Today. They will give you the full list. But on today's show, we're going to break down the Jets who made the list. We'll talk about what this means for the team in 2025 and beyond. And we'll talk about Jets who may make the list in future years. So we'll start off by talking about the Jets who made the list. There were 3 players who were elected to our Locked On NFL Top 100 team. They were Sauce Gardner, Quinnen Williams, and Garrett Wilson. And I think 2 of these players were ranked about where they should be ranked. I think there was one Jets player who was ranked too low, and that player was Sauce Gardner, who was the number 3 rated corner on our list. Now, Patrick Surtain was the number 1 rated corner on our list. He was 9th overall in the league. And I think it's difficult to object to that. Surtain has a long track record of excellent play in the league, and he was the league's top corner in 2024. Where I have an objection is the number 2 corner, because Sauce Gardner ended up number 28 on our list. At number 23 is Derek Stingley Jr. from the Houston Texans. Now, I want to preface this by saying that I have a lot of respect for my colleagues on the Locked On Podcast Network. You'll hear me chat with them through the season. We do crossover Wednesday episodes with that week's opponent and that podcast each week during the regular season. But they got this one completely wrong. I say this respectfully. My colleagues got it completely wrong, putting Derek Stingley Jr. ahead of Sauce Gardner. And to put Derek Stingley Jr. ahead of Sauce Gardner, you essentially have to say that 1 year's worth of play is more important than 3 years worth of play. These players were both drafted in the year 2022. And I'll give you a blind taste test right now. Player A, year 1, 9 games. Year 2, 11 games. Year 3, first team All-Pro. Player B, year 1, first team All-Pro. Year 2, first team All-Pro. Year 3, an above average season. There's really no way you can justify putting Derek Stingley ahead of Sauce Gardner on this list unless you are literally saying 2024 is the only thing that matters. If you're saying 2024 is the only thing that matters, again, that means that you think 1 year worth of data matters more than 3 years worth of data, because these guys entered the league together. And there's no question that since they entered the league, Sauce Gardner's been the better player. I think it's very difficult to justify this. I can't come up with a justification. I have no issue with Patrick Surtain being the number 1 corner. Again, he was the best corner in the league last year. And unlike Stingley, he has a track record of excellent play well before the 2024 season. You can't put Stingley ahead of Sauce Gardner. I'm sorry, you just can't do it. I love you, my colleagues. There's no justification for that. Now, I think the other 2 Jets were put in roughly the right spot, both relative to the rest of the league and relative to their position. Quinnen Williams came in at number 62. That made him the number 5 defensive tackle. The tackles that were ahead of Quinnen Williams were Chris Jones of Kansas City, who is the consensus best defensive tackle in the league. You also have Dexter Lawrence of the Giants. You have Jalen Carter of the Eagles, and you have Jeffrey Simmons of the Tennessee Titans. Quinnen Williams belongs on the top 100 list. I think it's fair to say he's one of the top 5 defensive tackles in the league. He's a guy who is just going to be on we're going to start doing this list year after year on the Locked On Podcast Network. And Quinnen Williams is going to be on this list for a long time because Quinnen Williams' game is built to age very well. Quinnen Williams is a phenomenal physical specimen. He's a great athlete. He's strong. He's difficult to block. But Quinnen Williams' game is built to age well because he wins with technique. I talk about this a lot on the show. There are certain guys whose game is not going to age well. Those are the guys who tend to rely solely on athletic ability, because athletic ability fades. And if you're relying only on athletic ability, well, that's not going to last for very long. Players age, and when you age, you lose athletic ability. Players who win on technique are going to last longer, because the older you get, the better your technique gets. If you're a technician, you're only going to improve as time moves forward. So I expect Quinnen Williams to continue to be on this list. And I would even argue that 62 is probably going to be about as low as you'll see him for some time, because he's coming off a year that wasn't that spectacular by Quinnen Williams standards. A vintage Quinnen Williams season will probably put him in the top 20. The third Jets player who made it was Garrett Wilson. Garrett came in at 79. That ranked him as either the 11th or 12th best receiver, depending on where you want to put Travis Hunter. And the only real argument I would have with the way the wide receivers shook out, and again, you can go to our show Locked On Sports Today here on the Locked On Podcast Network for a full accounting. The only issue I have with this list, really, when it comes to the wide receivers, is the fact Travis Hunter was on it whatsoever. Look, I was as big of a Travis Hunter fan as anybody during this year's draft process. But I don't see how you can put a guy who hasn't played a game yet as one of the top 100 players in the NFL. And Travis Hunter is both a corner and a wide receiver. So, if he pans out, he's going to be a top 10 player every single year. But he hasn't panned out yet. I think you got to be able to play a game before I'm willing to say you're one of the top 100 players in the league. But generally what I say about Garrett Wilson is you could make an argument. I think there's a range for Garrett Wilson. He's somewhere probably between the 10th best receiver in the league and the 20th best receiver in the league. And if you want to be really positive on Garrett, you could say he's close to 10. You could say like 11 is probably a good spot for him. If you want to be a little bit more negative on Garrett, you could say he's number 20. And look, there are lots of great receivers in the league. Being the 20th best receiver is not an insult. There's as much receiver talent in the NFL as there has been at any point in the league's history. So I have to say, I think for the most part, my colleagues got it right. I think they got the Sauce Gardner, Derek Stingley thing wrong. Sauce Gardner is at worst the number 2 corner in the league. I understand you don't want to put him on one based on last year, especially with how good Surtain was in Denver. You can't put him number 3, though. But 2 versus 3, that's not a huge miss. Garrett Wilson at 11 or 12 best receiver, that makes sense. Quinnen Williams as the number 5 defensive tackle, that makes sense. Who would the next Jets player be? I mean, you could make a case for Quincy Williams. I think he would be the one guy who didn't make the list who you might make a strong argument for, but I think you also look at this by position. And our host here on Locked On NFL really seems to take heart in value in emphasizing positional value, because 15 wide receivers made it, 13 corners made it, 13 quarterbacks made it, 11 cornerbacks made it, 10 edge rushers, 9 offensive tackles. So those are the premium positions in the league. Those were the positions where we loaded up the most. There were only 5 linebackers to make the list. So if this list was divided more equally among positions, I think Quincy Williams probably would have made it, along with his brother Quinnen, who of course was number 62. But I think based on the way they did it, it really did seem like our hosts, when they voted, emphasized positional value, which means not as many linebackers. I think Quincy's a top 10 linebacker in the league, but I'm not, you could make a case he's a top 5 linebacker, but I can't get upset with that. Really, the only thing I can get upset with is the Sauce Gardner, ranking behind Derek Stingley. There's no excuse for that. Other than that, I think that, generally speaking, we did a pretty good job ranking the Jets. Now, head here on the Locked On Jets podcast, let's talk about what this means, because I've been making an argument through the course of the offseason that people are selling the Jets talent level short. I think this list proves it, and I'll explain that in detail as we continue here on this special Thursday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action? Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned on the beach. Of course, baseball's heating up. We just passed the All-Star game, so second half, Mets and Yankees both trying to make a playoff push. Again, there's golf happening this summer. You can also look forward to the NFL. We're nearing the start of training camp, which means opening day is getting closer. Jets only under 5.5 wins on FanDuel. I think that's selling them short. Well, if you believe that, FanDuel's the place to get in on the action. New to FanDuel? Well, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Again, FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. It's the place to get in on the action. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. And a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Today is a special edition of Locked On Jets. We are focused on our Locked On NFL top 100 players list. There were 3 Jets on the list. And to me, this is further evidence of something that I've been saying. And if you're an everydayer, you've heard me say this through the offseason. This Jets team is being sold short. I really do believe that that's true. And I feel like it's a bit of an overcorrection because this time last year and this time 2 years ago, people were talking about the Jets as a potential Super Bowl team. And I think if you look back at those years, the Jets were probably overrated in their talent level. People were overrating how much ability those Jets teams had to make deep playoff runs. And I know some people will say, no, it was only coaching. They actually were talented enough to go to the Super Bowl. Well, here's the thing. They were counting on Aaron Rodgers to be an elite quarterback. He wasn't. Last year, they were counting on Tyron Smith to be an elite left tackle. He wasn't. They were counting on Mike Williams to be a difference-making receiver, a guy who could be a high-end number 2 receiver, maybe a 1,000-yard guy. He wasn't. 2 years ago, they were counting on Dwayne Brown to be a quality left tackle. He wasn't. Last year, they were counting on Hassan Reddick to be a difference-making pass rusher. He wasn't. These things weren't coaching. These were just older players for the most part, or in the case of Reddick, a guy seeking a new contract who couldn't produce, maybe used to be good, but couldn't produce at a high level anymore. They all departed this offseason, and people, because these guys who didn't produce have left, people now assume the Jets have a terrible roster. People assume the Jets have maybe the worst roster in the league. And that's not true either. It may not have been true that the Jets may not have been a Super Bowl contender in 2023 and 2024, but they don't have the worst team in the league. And again, I think this list is evidence of that because Jets put 3 players on this top 100 list. And it's difficult to argue against any of the 3 guys. Do you think Sauce Gardner is not a top 100 player? You think Quinnen Williams is not a top 100 player? You think Garrett Wilson's not a top 100 player? Again, if we had more equality in the positions, you could even make a case Quincy Williams should be on the list. So Jets have 3 top 100 players. That's not the most in the league. The Eagles led the league. Eagles put 7 players in our top 100 list. But there are only 13 teams with more players on the top 100 list than the Jets. So when it comes to elite level talent, the Jets are right at the league median. Now, the Jets kind of lack depth. The Jets don't have great backups at a lot of positions. There are positions where they still have question marks. There are positions where they still have holes. And that's a testament to, some of the mismanagement the previous regime did. It's a testament to some of the poor salary cap decisions the Jets made over the previous 2 years, which kind of prevented them from improving this offseason. But there's a base of talent here. And it starts with those top 100 players, the three guys who made the list: Garrett Wilson, Quinnen Williams, Sauce Gardner. It doesn't end there. We could talk Quincy Williams, a guy who was a first-team All-Pro at the linebacker position 2 years ago, Quinnen Williams' brother. But even among the guys who aren't stars, there are lots of quality starters on this football team. We can talk, Joe Tippmann at the center position. We can talk Elijah Vera Tucker at right guard. Even John Simpson last year at left guard had a quality season. There are some young players who might be part of future NFL 100 lists. We'll get to them in the future. Can Breece Hall finally have that big season we've been waiting on? Breece Hall has shown flashes. Breece Hall's shown he's a good running back in this league. Question, can he take his game to the next level? And if he can, that's the sort of thing that can make a big difference on the offensive side of the ball for the Jets. Jamien Sherwood, the guy had a breakout season last year. Jamien Sherwood's not a star right now, but he's an ascending player, a guy entering his prime, a guy who's gotten better every single year he's been in the league. And the point here is not that the Jets are going to be a Super Bowl team this year, because they're probably not. The point's not even that the Jets are going to be a playoff team. I think it's possible. I think that, they're a team that if certain things break right, if they have good injury luck, and if the schedule maybe isn't as tough as we think it's going to be, and if, they get a few good bounces in close games, and if for once maybe a bad call goes their way to key spotting instead of going against them, the Jets could make the playoffs. I think the difference between a 7-10 team and a 10-7 team, very small in the NFL, because most of the games are close games. And close games swing on a few plays here or there. And sometimes a few plays here or there swing 3 games to you. And those 3 games turn you from a 10-7 team into from a 7-10 team into a 10-7 team. That could happen with the Jets this year. But the point I'm going to make is people keep predicting that the Jets are going to be picking in the top 5 of the NFL draft. I just don't see that happening. Anything can happen. Any team can be decimated by injuries. Any team can have bad luck. I mean, look, last year the Jets were probably a bit unlucky to not be a 7 or 8 win team. They were 5-12. They probably should have been something like 7-10 or 8-9. They had their share of bad luck in close games, but I don't think that team got any worse. Again, that was a team that was probably unlucky to not be a 7-win team or an 8-win team, and they didn't really lose any players who were significant contributors. I mean, I know they lost Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers was at best a middle of the pack quarterback. I think it's perfectly reasonable to think that Justin Fields can replicate the production Aaron Rodgers produced last year. I'm not saying Justin Fields' career matches Aaron Rodgers' career, mind you. I'm saying the 2024 version of Aaron Rodgers really wasn't that good. And I think you go across the team, there are lots of big name players, lots of guys who have had distinguished careers who were on the Jets in 2024, but those guys did not produce. And now the leadership of this team is on these homegrown players, these excellent homegrown players. 3 of the top 100 players in the league are homegrown Jets: Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, Quinnen Williams. But there are other other very solid homegrown players, even if they aren't star level guys. And the guys I mentioned: AVT, Tippmann, Sherwood. Quincy Williams, not quite homegrown because he was drafted by Jacksonville, but the Jets got him and developed him. So all of this, I think, is just a reminder that there is a core of talent on this team. And when Adam Gase was here, if we had done this list when Adam Gase is here, there's no way there would be 3 Jets on the top 100 list. If we did this list when Todd Bowles was here, there's no way there would be 3 Jets on the top 100 list. The Jets have legitimate talent on this roster now. It may not be great. And I think part of it is the Jets have missed the playoffs 14 straight years. People seen the Jets lose year after year after year. So they assume it's just the same old thing. And last year, they were one of the most disappointing teams in recent memory. The 2024 Jets will be remembered in the NFL for just how little they accomplished, for how high the expectations were, and how little they produced. But that's not to say that this current Jets team is among the worst in the league, because they simply are not. And this list proves that. It's another piece of evidence which shows that the Jets are not one of the worst teams in the league. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, I want to take a look at the future, because Jets aren't a great team right now. If they're going to be a great team, they're going to have to put even more players on this list. Who are the Jets who might make next year's top 100 list? I think there are a couple possibilities, and it all depends on whether they produce in 2025. We'll talk about who they are as we continue here on this Thursday edition of Locked On Jets. This is a special NFL Top 100 edition of the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Thursday. Here at the Locked On Podcast Network, the hosts of our NFL shows have voted on the top 100 players in the NFL, and there were indeed 3 New York Jets who made the list, and I think all 3 of them were deserving: Sauce Gardner, Quinnen Williams, and Garrett Wilson. And as I mentioned in the last segment, this is evidence that the Jets' talent level is not as bad as people make it out to be, because there are 3 top 100 players in the league. And again, only 13 of the 32 teams had more than 3 players make the list. Doesn't mean the Jets are a Super Bowl team. Doesn't mean the Jets are at the top of the league, but it shows you there's more talent on this team than people realize. And the Jets have some issues. Again, the depth on this roster is not great. The top end talent is quite good. The depth is not great. That includes backups, but it also includes starters at spots where there are question marks. If the Jets want to get to the top of the league, they're going to have to add more players to the top 100 list in years going forward. So who could these players be? Well, as I mentioned, one of them is Quincy Williams. And I think if we had done this list a year ago, Quincy Williams probably makes the list because he was coming off that first team All-Pro season. His 2024 was not quite as good, but I think most people would say Quincy Williams is a top 10 linebacker in this league. And if he's not, he's right on the cusp. If you were doing a top 10 linebacker list, Quincy Williams would either be on the list or he'd be an honorable mention player. And last year, there were lots of Jets players who had disappointing seasons. I don't think Quincy Williams' season was disappointing. I think it was a step back from where he was in 2023. And the entire infrastructure around the team was broken in many ways, like really across the board, because of some of the bizarre and erratic decisions the owner made, particularly firing the coach 5 games into the season. And I think that sent a lot of players into a tailspin. I don't think Quincy Williams went into a tailspin. I just don't think he was as good as he was in 2023. If Quincy Williams bounces back this season, he could make the list. Breece Hall's a big wild card. I wrote an article on GanggreenNation.com previewing the Jets running back position last week. And one of the things that stuck out to me about Breece Hall is that he's a good back right now. In his rookie season, he looked like he was going to be a great back. But there have been some mitigating circumstances. In 2023, he broke 7 home run rushes. He had 7 runs of at least 20 yards, which was pretty good, which was among the league leaders. He wasn't consistent, though, on a play-to-play basis. His success rate was pretty low. Success rate measures what percentage of your play rushes are successful. Then in 2024, he got off to a slow start. His first month was really bad. After that, he averaged in his final 13 games, his final 12 games, he averaged 4.7 yards per carry. His success rate was just above the league average. The issue with Breece in 2024 was he wasn't hitting as many home runs. He went from 7 runs of 20-plus yards in 23 to 3 runs of 20-plus yards in 24. But Breece also mentioned that Breece mentioned that during the offseason when he spoke to the media that he was dealing with a knee injury. He suffered a knee injury in the November game against Indianapolis. All 3 of his home run rushes came before that injury. So after he suffered that injury, maybe he was just too banged up. Maybe he didn't have that extra gear. And in 23, he had the home run rushes, but he wasn't consistent on a play-to-play basis. But the Jets had all sorts of offensive line issues in 23. So the question is, was the 2022 version of Breece Hall the real version? 2022, he looked like a budding superstar. 23, he showed flashes, but he wasn't consistent on a play-to-play basis. But maybe it was the offensive line. 24, slow start, but after that slow start, he was consistent on a play-to-play basis. He wasn't hitting home runs, but maybe it was the injury. If Breece Hall could put the pieces together, he's another guy that could make that top 100 list. And then I think you also have to talk about the young bookend tackles. Let me give you an amazing fact right now. And this is something I looked up the other day, which really is incredible. The combined age of the 2 Jets starting tackles in 2024 on opening day was 66 years old. The combined age of the 2 projected starting tackles in 2025 is 43 years old. So we went from 66 last year to 43 this year. I doubt anybody's kept those records, but that has to be an NFL record. The fact you've dropped a combined 23 years in the age of your 2 starting tackles from one year to another. Armand Membou, who was the first-round pick, look, anytime you pick a guy as high as the Jets picked Membou, there's a chance he's going to be a star. We know for a fact that the Jets were not the only team that liked Membou. We know for a fact that if the Jets had not picked him, he would not have been on the board for much longer. And then on the other side, you have Olu Fashanu. And Membou is a bit of a projection. I mean, because he never played before. You never really know how good someone's going to be before they set foot on the field. I think you got to feel really good about Olu Fashanu's trajectory last year. He started off really slow. And I know a lot of people will say he started off slow because the Jets he was playing him outside his natural position. He played some right tackle early. He even played some guard after the Jets suffered some injuries there when he's really a natural left tackle. Maybe that contributed to his struggles early, but I also just felt he was kind of physically overmatched. And sometimes what happens with rookies is, they got to hit the weight room. They enter the league, in college, they didn't need to be as strong because the guys they were facing weren't as good. But once you hit the pros, you're going up against some of the best athletes in the world, some of the biggest guys, some of the fastest guys, some of the most athletic guys, some of the strongest guys. So there's an adjustment period. And I wonder whether Olu Fashanu, got stronger as the season went on, because once he went back to his natural position at left tackle, and look, part of it may have been just going back to his natural position, but he just looked stronger. He didn't look overmatched the way he did when he played early in the season. And there were a couple of games where he pitched a shutout, where he did not allow a pressure. And that's the type of thing you love to see in a rookie, because you look at rookie tackles across the NFL. A lot of the ones who even a lot of the ones that turn out to be good struggle in the early part of their careers. And part of that, again, is because they're facing these athletes who are much better than the guys they faced in college. But part of it is also just they're facing pass rushers with more sophisticated moves. There aren't many pass rushers in college who have more than one move. So if you neutralize that one move, you've shut them down. In the NFL, you go up against a pass rusher. You shut down that first move, he moves to a second pass rushing move. And sometimes when you shut down the second pass rushing move, he moves on to a third in the same play. It's difficult to get up to speed on that. So the fact that Olu Fashanu, by the end of his rookie season, was able to stop guys, was able to pitch a couple shutouts and not allow a pressure. And this happened in multiple games. That's a really impressive fact. That's a really impressive start to his career, because a lot of guys, even the guys who end up being good tackles, it takes them to year 2 to get to that point. So Olufashinu, I think, should be on a watch list for potentially making this top 100 list a year from now. And look, part of this is wishful thinking. Part of it's we hope that these guys will make the list. But there are some budding potential stars on this team. I think you also have to look to the defensive line for the Jets. Jermaine Johnson was a Pro Bowler 2 years ago and then got injured last year. Can he bounce back from an injury? But I'll tell you one other guy I've got my eye on who might be a sleeper for this list next year is Will McDonald. Will McDonald posted a double-digit sack season in year 2. And the big thing for me is that he was really only a pass rusher. He was kind of undersized. Something I didn't really understand was, he entered the league as an undersized pass rusher. So I thought, but he could add bulk. His body type was always to the point where he could add bulk without sacrificing his explosiveness. And for whatever reason, the Jets did not have him add bulk between offseason 1 and offseason 2. Well, Aaron Glenn's come in, new coaching staff, and he said that McDonald's bulked up this year. Last year, McDonald, even though he was an effective pass rusher, really struggled against the run. But if if he's bigger and stronger this year, and he can set the edge effectively, that means you can play him on 3 downs. That means he can be an every down player, and he doesn't have to be a great run defender, because again, he was a double-digit sack guy last year. A guy can get you 10 sacks. You just need him to be able to be functional against the run. If Will McDonald can be an every down player and add double-digit sacks, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I think there's an outside shot he could be on this list next year. So, we have guys who are on the list right now. And the best part about this for the Jets is these guys are all either in their prime or entering their prime. There are no old guys on the list. Like there may have been a year ago, people may have mistakenly put Aaron Rodgers on the list. They may have put Tyron Smith on the list. They may have put someone like CJ Mosley on the list, even though CJ was at the end of his career. CJ was a really good player during his prime, but he was at the end of his career. These are the guys who are on the list this year for the Jets should be on the list for a long time to come. But beyond that, there are some guys who have the potential to join them. And if the Jets can get from 3 guys on this list to 5 guys on this list, suddenly they become a team that becomes very interesting in the AFC. But it's all contingent on how those guys play this year. So anyway, thank you so much for listening. And you should also know that the NFL Top 100 list is on Locked On Sports today. It's voted on by the NFL host of the Locked On Podcast Network. Our Top 100 was formed by experts who cover all the teams and players every day. Find the full list on Locked On Sports today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you for listening to Locked On Jets today. If you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you're watching on YouTube, give this episode a big thumbs up. And if you're listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. If you enjoy, anyway, take care, everybody. Have a great Thursday. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.